She was in the pain of childbirth while he was sleeping with his mistress. That same night, she left the divorce papers and vanished. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Yesterday, I suffered a minor heart attack, and my beloved Binta has begged me to stop telling stories. I'm in tears as I say this. I can't find the words to express how much pain I feel being away from you. This channel, this family, it's my heart. I don't want to let go. Please, keep me in your prayers. But for now, my student, my little brother, Ben Peters, will carry this torch for me. He's young, he's full of love, and I trust him with my heart. Promise me one thing. Treat this channel like your own. Support him the way you supported me. Let him feel the warmth of this beautiful family. God bless you all. Now, Ben, it's your turn.
Hi, my beautiful family. My name is Ben Peters, the little brother of Mr. Peters. Today, I come to you with a heavy heart, because Mr. Peters is not feeling well. He's the heart and soul of this channel, and I know how much he means to each and every one of you. I'm not here to replace him. No one ever could. But I am here to carry his light, his love, and his passion for stories. For you, his beloved family. Please, don't walk away. Don't judge me too quickly. Just give me one chance, one single chance, to show you that I carry the same fire, the same love, and the same spirit as my brother. I promise from the depth of my heart, I will give you my best, because you deserve nothing less. And until Mr. Peters returns stronger than ever, let me be your storyteller, your friend. Your brother. Stay with me. Believe in me. Let's keep this family together. Betrayal arrives without warning, like crystal shattering on marble. Evangeline Beaumont heard it the instant she stepped through the mahogany doors of her Beacon Hill mansion, designer heels clicking against Italian stone with military precision. 3 years of marriage, 6 years of building what she believed was love, and everything collapsed in a single heartbeat. She had returned early from Boston, excitement coursing through her veins. The news she carried landing the city's most prestigious charity gala contract, a $1 million event that would crown her the Northeast premier coordinator, now felt like bitter irony. She stood frozen at the grand staircase, listening to her husband's laughter, mingling with another woman's breathless sighs from their bedroom. Evangeline had learned resilience in Pittsburgh steel mills, raised by grandmother Cordelia after her parents' death. At 28, she had transformed Beaumont Affairs from a borrowed card table into a multi-million-dollar empire, coordinating presidential galas and celebrity weddings that made headlines. She was the woman who never let anyone see her. Sweat until now. So when she climbed those stairs with predatory silence, smartphone recording, heart hammering like war drums, she moved with calculated precision that had made her legendary in business circles. The bedroom door stood slightly ajar, as if Damien Ravencroft, her husband, her business partner, the man who had sworn before God and 300 guests to honor and cherish, her couldn't even be bothered to hide his betrayal properly. Through the crack, she saw them. Damien, salt and pepper hair disheveled, expensive suit jacket thrown carelessly across the anniversary chair she had chosen. And Vivian Delacroix, his secretary, a blonde woman 10 years younger who had always smiled too sweetly and complimented Evangeline's dresses with subtle condescension. They were tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets Evangeline had selected, in a bed where she had once believed in forever. "She'd never suspect," Damien was saying, his voice carrying that arrogance which once charmed her. Evangeline's too busy building her little empire to notice what's happening in her own home. Besides, after the Hartwell acquisition finalizes next month, I won't need her business connections anymore. Vivian's laugh was crystalline breaking. Poor little Evangeline. Does she know you're planning divorce the moment the deal closes? All that work building her precious company, and she doesn't realize you've been using her client list to secure your investments. The betrayal cut deeper than adultery. It was systematic dismantling of everything she had built. orchestrated by the man she had trusted with both heart and business. But Evangeline Beaumont had not survived foster care, earned Harvard MBA summa cum laude, and built an empire by crumbling at warfare's first sign. Instead, she lifted her phone higher, ensuring the video captured every damning word, every telling detail. Her hands remained steady as surgical instruments, breathing controlled like a meditation master. She photographed documents scattered on the nightstand, financial records and client lists from her own company, evidence, ammunition, tools for her counterattack. When she had everything needed, Evangeline stepped back with a queen's grace retreating from a battlefield already won. In her walk-in closet, she packed with military efficiency, essential documents, grandmother's jewelry, her lucky pen from the first major contract, and 3 of her most powerful business suits. Everything else, the mansion, cars, the life they had built together, could burn for all she cared. She left her wedding ring on Damien's pillow with a single note written in elegant script. Checkmate. By 6 o'clock that evening, Evangeline stood in the Four Seasons Grand Ballroom, surveying her masterpiece. The Children's Hospital Charity Gala was her largest solo project to date. 800 of Boston's elite gathered to raise money for a new pediatric wing. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across silk-draped tables, each centerpiece a work of art she had personally designed. Orchestra music floated through the air like prayer. Champagne flowing like liquid gold dot, she moved through the crowd like a force of nature in midnight blue Valentino. Natural hair swept into an elegant updo showcasing diamond earrings grandmother had left her. Every conversation, handshake, smile was perfectly calculated. No one could see the storm raging beneath her composure. This was her kingdom, her domain where she reigned absolutely. Mrs. Ravencroft, the evening is absolutely magnificent, gushed Margaret Whitmore, one of Boston's most influential socialites. You've outdone yourself. Thank you, Evangeline replied with trademark grace, though the name felt like acid on her tongue. By tomorrow, she would legally reclaim her maiden name. Tonight, she would endure it one last time. Near the silent auction tables, where she was adjusting a Martha's Vineyard vacation package display, she first felt eyes on her. Not the usual admiring glances she was accustomed to. This was different. Deeper, more penetrating. She turned, and her world shifted on its axis. Maximilian Ashworth stood 20 feet away, champagne flute forgotten in his hand, piercing blue eyes fixed on her with intensity that made her breath catch. He was tall, easily 6'3", with dark hair silvered at temples and presence that commanded attention without demanding it. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, but it was the intelligence in his eyes and subtle strength in his bearing that made him remarkable. She knew who he was, of course. Everyone in Boston's business circles knew Maximilian Ashworth, the philanthropist who had built his technology empire from nothing after his parents died in a plane crash when he was 19. Notoriously private, rarely attending social events, never photographed with the same woman twice. Forbes had named him one of America's most eligible bachelors 3 years running, though he seemed utterly indifferent to the title. Their eyes met across the ballroom, and something electric passed between them, recognition without introduction, understanding without explanation. He began moving toward her with purposeful strides, and Evangeline felt her heart rate quicken for the first time that day for reasons having nothing to do with betrayal. Evangeline Beaumont, he said when he reached her, his voice a warm baritone that seemed to resonate through her entire body. I've heard extraordinary things about your work. She noted that he used her maiden name, though she wasn't certain how he knew it. Mr. Ashworth, I wasn't aware you were attending tonight. I wasn't planning to, he admitted, eyes never leaving hers. But I heard the woman who organized this event was someone exceptional. I wanted to see for myself. There was something in his tone, in the way he looked at her, that suggested he saw more than just her professional reputation. It was as if he could see the battle she had fought today, the strength it had taken to stand here radiating confidence while her personal world crumbled. And what's your verdict? She asked, lifting her chin with the regal bearing that had made her legendary. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, not the practiced charm of a businessman, but something genuine and devastating. I think you're the strongest woman in this room, and you're fighting a war most people can't even see. The words hit her like lightning. How could this stranger see what she had worked so hard to hide? How could you look past the perfect facade? To the warrior beneath? I don't know what you mean, she replied, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Don't you? He stepped closer, and she caught his scent cedar and bergamot with an undertone of something uniquely masculine. You've been checking your phone every 10 minutes, but not for work. Your smile hasn't reached your eyes all evening, despite this being your triumph. And there's a fire in you that suggests someone has seriously underestimated who they're dealing with. Evangeline stared at him, shocked by his perceptiveness. You don't know me, Mr. Ashworth. No, he agreed, his voice dropping to an intimate level that made her pulse race. But I recognize strength when I see it. And I have a feeling that whoever has tried to dim your light today is about to discover they've made a catastrophic mistake. For a moment, the ballroom faded away. There was only this man with his knowing eyes and his ability to see straight through to her soul. Evangeline felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The sensation of being truly seen, not just as the perfect event coordinator or the dutiful wife, but as the warrior she had always been. I should get back to my guests, she said finally, though she made no move to leave. Of course, he replied, but he didn't step back either. But Evangeline, when you're ready to stop fighting alone, you'll find I'm not going anywhere. The promise in his words sent shivers down her spine. As she walked away, she could feel his eyes following her. And for the first time since discovering Damien's betrayal, she felt something other than anger. She felt hope. Chapter 2. Unexpected Refuge. Mountain air filled Evangeline's lungs like salvation, crisp, pure, unmarked by Boston's lies. Standing on Grandmother Cordelia's wraparound porch, watching sunrise transform the white mountains into gold and amber, she discovered something missing for weeks: genuine peace. The cabin had been her sanctuary since childhood, where Cordelia taught her that strength came not from never falling, but from rising with more grace each time. Built from hand-hewn logs in 1952, it was modest compared to the Beacon Hill Mansion 2. Bedrooms, one bathroom, a kitchen eternally scented with cinnamon and hope, but it possessed what Damien's house never had: soul. Evangeline wrapped her hands around Cordelia's favorite mug, filled with coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and allowed herself the luxury of planning her next move. 3 days had passed since the gala, since she'd walked away from her marriage with dignity intact and evidence secured. Her lawyers were already in motion, bank accounts protected, business assets separated from Damien's with surgical precision. She had learned long ago that survival required preparation, and she had been preparing for this war since the moment she heard Vivian's laugh, echoing through her bedroom. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with Damien's calls, each voicemail more desperate. First came rage. You think you can just vanish? I created you, Evangeline. Without me, you're nothing. Then bargaining. It was meaningless, baby. Vivian is irrelevant. We can repair this. Finally, threats. You have no concept of what you're facing. I'll obliterate everything you've built. She deleted each message without listening to the end. Damien Ravencroft had taught her many things during their marriage, but the most valuable lesson was this: a man who would betray you once would do it again, and the only defense was complete severance. The sound of an axe biting into wood shattered the morning quiet. Evangeline frowned, setting down her coffee. The nearest neighbor was supposed to be miles away, according to the property records. She grabbed Grandmother's old hunting jacket and stepped outside, following the rhythmic thud of metal against timber. Through the trees, she spotted him, a tall figure in jeans and flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, attacking a fallen oak with the focused intensity of a man working through demons, even from behind. Even dressed like a lumberjack instead of a business mogul, She recognized Maximilian Ashworth immediately. "Most billionaires hire people to chop their wood," she called out, stepping into the clearing with the confidence of a woman who owned the ground she walked on. He turned, axe still in hand, and the smile that spread across his face was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. His dark hair was disheveled, cheeks flushed from exertion, and there was something beautifully human about seeing him stripped of his corporate armor. "Most event coordinators don't retreat to mountain cabins after destroying their husbands at charity galas," he replied, leaning on the axe handle. "I heard through the grapevine that Damien Ravencroft's world exploded spectacularly yesterday morning. Something about divorce papers, evidence of fraud, and assets frozen faster than he could say prenuptial agreement." Evangeline lifted an eyebrow. "The grapevine works quickly in Boston." "It does when the story involves the city's most respected event coordinator taking down one of its most arrogant investment bankers." He gestured toward the cabin barely visible through pine trees. "I bought that place 5 years ago. It's where I come when I need to remember that money can't solve everything." "And what can't your money solve, Mr. Ashworth?" "Call me Max," he said, and something in his voice made the shortening of his name sound intimate. "And the answer is the fact that I've been thinking about you for 3 days straight." The honesty in his admission hit her like a physical force. In her world of carefully orchestrated conversations and strategic social interactions, such directness was rare and devastating. "You don't know anything about me," she said, but she moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. "I know you're brilliant enough to outmaneuver a man who underestimated you. I know you're brave enough to walk away from everything comfortable when it no longer serves you. And I know you're strong enough to stand here looking like a queen, even when your world just imploded." He set the axe aside and faced her fully. "What I don't know is why you're carrying all that weight alone." Evangeline studied his face, searching for the calculation she was used to seeing in men's eyes when they looked at her. Instead, she found only genuine concern and something that looked like admiration. "Because I've learned that the only person you can truly depend on is yourself. That's a lonely way to live, but it's safe." "Safe is overrated," Max said, stepping closer. "So is lonely." They stood in the morning sunlight, surrounded by the scent of pine and possibility, and Evangeline felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in her adult life, she was looking at a man who didn't seem to want to rescue her or use her or diminish her. He simply wanted to know her. "I was going to chop kindling for the fireplace," she said, nodding toward the stack of smaller branches. "But I suppose you could make yourself useful since you're already armed with an axe. Are you offering to let me help you, Evangeline Beaumont? Because I have a feeling that's not something you do often." "Don't read too much into it," she replied, but she was smiling. "I just believe in putting freeloaders to work." They worked in companionable silence for the next hour, Max splitting the larger logs while Evangeline organized the kindling with the same precision she brought to everything else. She found herself stealing glances at him, noting the way he moved with economy and grace, the concentration on his face, the fact that he never once complained about the manual labor despite probably having people to handle such tasks. "You're good at that," she observed when he paused to wipe sweat from his forehead. "My father believed that a man should know how to work with his hands, regardless of how much money he had in the bank." Max's expression grew thoughtful. "He died when I was 19, just as I was getting ready to take some trust fund job and coast through life. His death taught me that nothing is guaranteed, and everything worth having requires effort." "Is that why you built your own empire instead of inheriting one?" "Partly, but mostly because I needed to prove to myself that I could." He looked at her directly. "I have a feeling you understand something about that." She did. God, she did. "My grandmother used to say that a woman who builds her own throne never has to worry about someone else's kingdom crumbling beneath her. Smart woman. The smartest. She raised me after my parents died, taught me that strength isn't about being hard, it's about being flexible enough to bend without breaking." and strong enough to spring back with more force than before. She sounds like she would have approved of how you handled Damien. Evangeline's smile turned sharp. Oh, she would have loved watching that arrogant bastard realize he'd been playing checkers while I was playing chess. Max laughed, a rich, genuine sound that seemed to come from his core. Remind me never to underestimate you. Smart man, she said, echoing his earlier words. They finished with the wood as the sun climbed higher, and Evangeline found herself reluctant to end their time together. There was something about Max that felt different from any man she'd ever met, a depth that matched her own, a strength that complemented rather than compete with hers. I suppose you'll be heading back to civilization soon, she said as they stacked the last of the kindling. Actually, I was planning to stay through the weekend. Sometimes a man needs to chop wood and think about life away from spreadsheets and board meetings. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. I don't suppose you'd let me cook you dinner tonight? I make a mean pasta carbonara, and I promise not to ask any questions you don't want to answer. Evangeline considered the offer. Everything. Logical told her to say no, to maintain her distance, to protect herself from further complication. But something deeper, some instinct that had served her well in business, told her that Maximilian Ashworth might be worth the risk. I'll bring the wine, she said finally. But I'm warning you, my standards are exceptionally high. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, he replied, and the warmth in his voice wrapped around her like a promised dot as she walked back to her cabin. Evangeline realized that for the first time in months, she was genuinely looking forward to the evening ahead. Damien and his betrayal felt like something from another lifetime, a darkness that couldn't touch the light beginning to dawn on her horizon. She had come to the mountains to heal, but perhaps, just perhaps, she had found something even better. She had found a man who saw her strength and wasn't threatened by it. She had found an equal. Chapter 3. The Secret Garden. 3 weeks post-mountains. Evangeline commanded her new financial district office, 30 floors above Boston Harbor. She had relocated Beaumont affairs as a bold declaration, not retreating, but advancing. Divorce. Proceedings moved with mechanical efficiency, while Damien's intimidation crumbled. Against her fortress of evidence, her phone buzzed with the familiar chime that had become the highlight of her days. Max, working late again, Empress of Events? The city looks beautiful from your new kingdom. Evangeline turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, scanning the building across the street until she spotted a figure silhouetted against lit windows. 40 floors up. Even at this distance, she could make out his distinctive profile, and warmth flooded through her chest. Evangeline, some empires require midnight oil, Your Majesty, though the view has certainly improved recently. Max? Dinner? I know a place with an excellent view and complete privacy. Evangeline, if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, Mr. Ashworth, the answer is yes. But I bring my own wine tonight. Max, rooftop garden in 20 minutes. And Evangeline, bring your appetite for more than just food. The message sent heat racing through her veins. Over the past 3 weeks, they had developed a ritual that felt both natural and revolutionary. Evening conversations that started as business discussions and evolved into something far more intimate. Lunches that lasted 3 hours. Phone calls that stretched until dawn. And beneath it all, a simmering attraction that grew stronger with each encounter. Evangeline had never been a woman who let personal relationships interfere with business, but Max challenged every rule she had made. For herself, he was brilliant enough to match her strategically, successful enough to understand her ambition, and confident enough to appreciate her strength rather than feel threatened by it. 20-5 minutes later, she stepped off the private elevator onto the rooftop of Max's building, her breath catching as it did every time she entered his secret sanctuary. The rooftop garden was a masterpiece of urban design, thousands of square feet of carefully cultivated paradise suspended above the city's chaos. White roses climbed trellises that created intimate alcoves, while jasmine and gardenia perfumed the air with intoxicating sweetness. Soft lighting transformed the space into something magical, and the view of Boston's skyline provided a glittering backdrop. Max stood near the central fountain, his jacket discarded, his white shirt sleeves rolled up, looking like a prince in his kingdom. He had set up dinner at their usual table, a small wrought iron piece, positioned to take advantage of both the harbor view and the privacy provided by climbing roses. "You're late," he said without turning around, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm never late. I arrive precisely when I intend to," she replied, setting down a bottle of vintage Bordeaux. "Besides, anticipation makes everything sweeter." He turned then, and the look in his eyes made her pulse quicken. 3 weeks of evening encounters had changed something between them. What had started as intellectual sparring had evolved into something deeper, more dangerous, infinitely more compelling. "Have I mentioned that I love the way your mind works?" he asked, moving closer. "Frequently," along with several other compliments that would make a weaker woman swoon. She tilted her head, studying his face. "But I'm not a weak woman. Am I, Max?" "No," he said, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that made her feel like the only woman in the world. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, and somehow, impossibly, you make me stronger too." They had fallen into this dance over the past week, circling each other like two predators recognizing a worthy opponent, neither willing to make the first move that would shift their relationship from professional fascination to personal obsession. "Your pasta carbonara awaits," he said, gesturing toward the table. "Though I have to warn you, I may have gotten distracted thinking about you and added extra everything." "Confidence becomes you," she replied, allowing him to seat her. "Though I reserve judgment until I taste it." The meal was perfect, rich, complex, satisfying in ways that had nothing to do with food. They talked about everything and nothing. Her plans to expand Beaumont affairs internationally, his latest philanthropic venture funding technology education. In underserved communities, their shared love of old movies and Italian wine. Their mutual disdain for people who confuse wealth with worth. "I have a confession," Max said as they finished the main course. "I've been investigating you." Evangeline's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Oh? Nothing invasive," he said quickly. "Just research, the kind you do before making a major business investment." "And what did your research reveal?" "That Evangeline Beaumont graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School. Started her company with a $5,000 loan and a dream. Has never missed a deadline or disappointed a client in 8 years of business. Volunteers at 3 different charities. Sends money to her grandmother's old church every month. And has never not once used her beauty or her charm to get ahead professionally." She studied his face, looking for signs of calculation or manipulation. Instead, she found only admiration and something that looked suspiciously like awe. "Thorough research," she said finally. "I told you, I never make important decisions without complete information." "And what decision are you making about me, Mr. Ashworth?" He leaned back in his chair, his blue eyes reflecting the garden lights. "That you're the most dangerous woman I've ever met." "Dangerous how?" "Because you make me want things I've never wanted before. Because you challenge every assumption I've made about what I need in my life. Because when I'm with you, I forget about everything else, my company, my responsibilities, my carefully planned future." He paused, his voice growing softer. "Because I think I'm falling in love with you, and that terrifies me." The admission hung between them like a challenge. Evangeline felt her heart rate accelerate, felt the walls she had carefully constructed around her emotions beginning to crack. This was dangerous territory, the kind that led to vulnerability, to dependence, to the sort of pain she had just escaped. But looking at Max, seeing the honesty in his eyes, the way he waited for her response without trying to influence it, she realized that perhaps some risks were worth taking. "I build my own throne," she said quietly, repeating her earlier statement. "I always have. I always will. I don't need rescuing. I don't need protecting. And I don't need anyone else's money or influence or connections to succeed. I know, he said simply. I'm not looking for someone to complete me, because I'm not incomplete. I'm not searching for my other half, because I'm already whole. I know that too. And I won't compromise my independence or my ambition or my strength for anyone, no matter how I feel about them. I wouldn't ask you to. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Don't you understand, Evangeline? It's precisely because you're all of those things that I want to build an empire with you. Not for you, not to rescue you, but with you. As equals, as partners in every sense of the word. The words hit her like lightning. In all her years of relationships, no man had ever offered partnership only protection, possession, or use of her connections. Max was offering something entirely different. Collaboration between equals, mutual respect, shared strength. That's a dangerous proposition, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. The best ones usually are. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of possibility hanging between them. Then Max stood, moving around the table to offer her his hand. Dance with me, he said. There's no music. There's always music when you're around. She took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet and into his arms. They moved slowly in the garden, surrounded by the scent of roses and the glittering lights of the city below. This close, she could feel the steady beat of his heart, could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes, could smell the cedar and bergamot scent that was uniquely his. I have rules, she said as they swayed together, such as no joint bank accounts, no merging of business interests without ironclad legal protection, no making decisions about my career or my life without consulting me first. Agreed. And if you ever lie to me, betray me, or treat me as anything less than your equal, I will destroy you so completely you'll wish Damien's fate on your worst enemy. Max's smile was radiant. I would expect nothing less from you. And I don't cook. I can burn water. I happen to be an excellent chef. I work late, travel frequently, and my business will always be a priority. As it should be. As mine is for me. She studied his face, looking for any sign that he was simply telling her what she wanted to hear. Instead, she found only sincerity and a heat that made her breath catch. Then perhaps, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, we could explore this dangerous proposition of yours. Perhaps, he agreed, his hand sliding up to cup her face. We could. When he kissed her, it was with the reverence of a man who understood exactly what he was being offered. Not just her lips, not just her body, but the trust of a woman who had learned the hard way that trust was the most precious gift she could give. Under the stars, surrounded by roses and possibility, Evangeline Beaumont kissed Maximilian Ashworth and felt something she had never expected to feel again, hope for. A future that did require her to be anything other than exactly who she was, a queen who had finally found her king. Chapter 4. Seeds of New Life. 2 months had transformed Evangeline's world in ways she had never imagined possible. What had begun as intellectual fascination had evolved into something that defied every careful boundary she had constructed. Around her heart, Max didn't just admire her strength, he challenged her to be even stronger. He didn't seek to possess her independence, he celebrated it. And when they made love, it was with the intensity of 2 powerful souls recognizing their perfect match. Their relationship had become the talk of Boston's elite circles, though neither cared about the speculation. They were too busy building something unprecedented, a partnership between equals that enhanced rather than diminished each of them. Evangeline stood in the marble bathroom of her newly renovated penthouse, staring at the small plastic test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines stared back at her, clear and undeniable, announcing a truth that sent shockwaves through her carefully. Ordered world. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind like a prayer and a promise. She sank onto the velvet bench beside her vanity, one hand automatically moving to her still flat stomach, wonder and fierce protectiveness already blooming in her. Chest. This child had been conceived in love pure, passionate, all-consuming love that she had never believed possible. Not duty, not obligation, not the desperate attempt to save a failing marriage that had motivated her previous pregnancy hopes with Damien. This baby was the product of nights when she and Max couldn't bear to be apart, when conversations about building empires together became explorations of building a family together. Her phone buzzed with a text from Max. Board meeting running late. Rain check on dinner? I'll make it up to you with that seafood risotto you love. Actually, could you come here when you're finished? I have something important to discuss. Everything all right? You sound serious. Everything is perfect. Better than perfect. Just ... come soon. She spent the next hour pacing her penthouse, rehearsing different ways to share the news. With Damien, she had planned elaborate reveals for pregnancies that never came, each negative test another crack in their foundation. But this felt different, sacred, powerful, life-changing in the most beautiful way possible. When Max arrived at 8:30, he found her curled on the sofa in silk pajamas, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking both vulnerable and radiant. In the soft lamplight, "You're glowing," he said, setting down his briefcase and moving to join her. Even more than usual, which shouldn't be physically possible. "Max," she began, then stopped, suddenly nervous. "We need to talk." His expression grew concerned as he sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. You know that, right?" The certainty in his voice, the unwavering support, made her heart swell with love so fierce it almost took her breath away. "I'm pregnant," she said simply. The words hung in the air between them for a heartbeat, then two. Max's face went through a series of expression shock, wonder, something that looked like pure joy before settling into a smile so radiant it could have powered the city below. "Pregnant," he repeated, as if testing the word. "You're..." We single quotes read ... There's a baby? "There's a baby," she confirmed, watching his face carefully. "Our baby." Max's hands moved to frame her face with the gentleness of a man handling the most precious thing in the world. "How do you feel about it?" "I know we never specifically discussed." "I feel powerful," she interrupted, surprising them both with the admission. "I feel like my body is doing this incredible thing, creating life from love. I feel protective and excited and terrified and absolutely certain that this is right." "Good," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "because I feel like you just told me we're going to create the most beautiful, brilliant, strong-willed child the world has ever seen. Our child will rule the world," she said with mock seriousness. "Our child will save the world," he corrected, pulling her into his arms. "Just like their mother is saving mine." They held each other in the soft light of her living room, both overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. Evangeline had never felt more complete, more purposeful, more certain that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "We should celebrate," Max murmured against her hair. "Champagne, no? Wait. Sparkling cider. The best restaurants in the city. A weekend in Paris." "We should," she agreed, tilting her head to look at him. "But right now, I just want to be here with you, thinking about our future." They spent the evening planning, dreaming, talking about everything from nursery designs to college funds to the kind of parents they wanted to be. Max shared stories about his own childhood, the lessons his father had taught him about honor and responsibility, while Evangeline talked about Cordelia's wisdom and the importance of raising a child who understood that strength came from character, not circumstances. "They'll have your eyes," Max said, his hand resting on her stomach with reverent tenderness. "Your stubborn streak," she countered. "Your brilliance. Your kindness. Your unshakable moral compass. Your ability to see the best in people." It was nearly midnight when Max's phone rang, shattering their perfect bubble. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. "It's my head of security," he said apologetically. "I should take this." Evangeline watched his expression grow darker as he listened to whatever was being reported. When he hung up, his face was grim. "What is it?" she asked, though something cold was already settling in her stomach. "Damien's been asking questions about me. About us. My security team says he's been making inquiries with some unsavory contacts. People who specialize in corporate sabotage. The happiness of the evening evaporated like mist. Evangeline felt her protective instincts, already heightened by pregnancy, sharpened to a razor's edge. What kind of questions? Details about my business dealings, my investments, my partnerships. He's looking for leverage, Evangeline. Something he can use to hurt me. She stood abruptly, her mind already racing through possibilities and contingencies. He can't touch you directly. Your reputation is spotless. Your business practices are above reproach. But if he could find something, anything, to damage your companies, he could cost me billions. More importantly, he could destroy the foundations I've built, the charities I fund, the people who depend on those organizations. Evangeline began pacing, her strategic mind fully engaged. This is about me. He's trying to hurt you to get to me, to prove that being with me comes at too high a cost. Evangeline, no, she said firmly, turning to face him. You don't understand how vicious Damien can be when he feels humiliated. He's not just angry about the divorce. He's furious that I outmaneuvered him, that I left him looking like a fool in front of Boston society. And now he sees you as the ultimate prize I chose over him. Max rose, moving to her with the calm confidence that had first attracted her. Let him come. I've built my empire to withstand attacks from men far more powerful than Damien Ravencroft. You don't know him like I do, she said, fear making her voice sharp. He's not just ruthless, he's petty. He'll go after everything you care about, everyone you protect. Your employees, your charitable causes, your reputation. He'll burn it all down just to watch you suffer. Then we'll fight him together. No. The word came out harder than she intended. I won't let you risk everything you've built because of me. I won't be responsible for destroying your life's work. Max's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Hello, darling. Damien's voice slithered through the speaker, smooth as silk and twice as deadly. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Important. Evangeline's blood turned to ice. What do you want, Damien? Have a conversation about your future and your boyfriends. You see, I've discovered some very interesting information about Mr. Ashworth's business practices. Things that, if they became public, might cause some complications for his various enterprises. You're bluffing. Am I? Did you know that 3 of his largest contracts were secured through his relationship with Senator Morrison? The same. Senator Morrison, who's currently under investigation for corruption. Or that his charitable foundation has been routing money through organizations with very questionable tax statuses. Max reached for the phone, but Evangeline held up a hand to stop him. She knew Damien well enough to recognize when he was holding real ammunition versus when he was fishing. What do you want? She repeated. Simple. End your little romance. Come back to me where you belong, and I'll forget all about Mr. Ashworth's legal vulnerabilities. Continue with this foolishness, and I'll make sure his empire crumbles just like ours did. I'd rather die than come back. To you, that's your choice, darling. But ask yourself this. How will you feel when your selfishness destroys an innocent man? How will you live with yourself when thousands of people lose their jobs because you couldn't give up your little midlife crisis? The line went dead, leaving Evangeline staring at the phone with growing horror. She knew Damien well enough to recognize when he was serious, and the cold satisfaction in his voice told her he believed he held winning cards. What can he actually do? She asked Max, who had been listening to her side of the conversation with growing fury. If he has evidence of impropriety, even circumstantial evidence, he could tie up my assets in investigations for years. He could destroy contracts, ruin business relationships, Force me to spend millions in legal fees defending against accusations that might be completely fabricated. And the people who depend on your foundation would suffer while I fought to clear my name. Evangeline sank onto the sofa, one hand protectively covering her stomach. The choice before her was impossible. Protect the man she loved and their unborn child by sacrificing his life's work, or fight and risk destroying everything he had built to help others. There has to be another way, she whispered. Max knelt before her, taking her hands in his. We'll find one. I promise you, Evangeline, we'll find a way to protect everyone you, our baby, my companies, everyone who depends on them. But even as he spoke the words, Evangeline's mind was already working through the brutal mathematics of the situation. Damien held the power to destroy not just Max, but thousands of innocent people who benefited from his work. And she was the only one who could stop him. The question was, what was she willing to sacrifice to protect the people she loved? Chapter 5. The Ultimate Sacrifice. For 3 days, Evangeline operated from a command center of her own creation. Her penthouse became mission control, legal documents spread across her dining table, investigators' reports covering her coffee table, laptop perpetually open to financial records and business contracts. She was fighting the most crucial battle of her life and losing. Max had hired the best attorneys money could buy, but even they admitted that Damien's threats weren't empty. He had indeed compiled a dossier of circumstantial evidence that, while not proving any actual wrongdoing, would be enough to trigger multiple investigations. The mere suggestion of impropriety could freeze assets, destroy business relationships, and paralyze Max's charitable foundations for years. The Morrison connection is the real problem, explained Patricia Henning, one of Boston's most feared defense attorneys, as she reviewed the documents spread before them. Your senator friend has been sloppy, and guilt by association could be devastating, especially with the current political climate. Evangeline watched Max's face as he absorbed this news. In 3 days, she had seen him transform from confident billionaire to a man genuinely terrified of losing everything he had spent his life building, not for himself, but for the thousands of people who depended on his organizations. How many employees would be affected by a full investigation? Evangeline asked quietly. Directly? About 15,000 across all his companies, Patricia replied. Indirectly, when you include the charities, the scholarship recipients, the communities that depend on his foundations, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of people. Max's jaw tightened. There has to be a legal solution. Some way to fight. This without what? Evangeline interrupted, though she already knew what he couldn't bring himself to say. Without you having to sacrifice yourself to protect me. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Because that's what it would take. Evangeline knew Damien well enough to understand that he would never stop, never relent until he had what he wanted. Her complete capitulation, her public humiliation, her return to a marriage that would slowly destroy her soul. I won't let you do it, Max said fiercely, moving to kneel beside her chair. I'll liquidate everything, move the assets offshore, find another way to, and let hundreds of thousands of people suffer while you rebuild? Evangeline shook her head. You know you couldn't live with that. Neither could I. Her phone buzzed with a text from Damien. Time's up, darling. My patience is wearing thin. Make your choice. Evangeline stared at the message, feeling the weight of impossible decisions crushing down on her. But beneath the fear and fury, something else was emerging, the cold, calculating strategic mind that had built her empire and destroyed Damien's threats before. I need some air, she announced, standing abruptly. Patricia, could you give us a few minutes? After the attorney left, Evangeline moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. Max joined her, his presence both comforting and heartbreaking. What are you thinking? He asked softly. I'm thinking about chess, she replied, her voice distant. About how sometimes the most powerful piece on the board has to sacrifice herself. To protect the king. Evangeline, no, listen to me. She turned to face him, and the strength in her eyes took his breath away. I've been approaching this all wrong. I've been trying to fight Damien on his terms, playing defense when I should. Be playing offense. What do you mean? I mean that Damien's greatest weakness has always been his arrogance. He assumes I'm still the same woman who married him, someone who would eventually break under pressure, someone who could be manipulated and controlled. Her smile was sharp as a blade. But I'm not that woman anymore. I haven't been for years. Max studied her face, recognizing the expression she wore when she was about to execute a particularly brilliant strategy. What are you planning? I'm planning to disappear, she said simply, but not the way Damien expects. She moved to her desk, pulling out a legal pad and beginning to write with swift, decisive strokes. He wants me to come crawling back to beg for his forgiveness, to publicly humiliate myself by returning to a marriage everyone knows was a sham. That would feed his ego and give him the public victory he craves. Evangeline, you can't seriously be considering, but what if I don't? Give him that satisfaction? She continued, her strategic mind now fully engaged. What if I simply vanish instead? No dramatic confrontation, no public spectacle, no victory for him to savor. That's not a solution. It's running away. No, she said firmly, turning to face him. Running away is what weak people do. This is a strategic retreat. The difference is intent and planning. She handed him the legal document she had been drafting. Damien's threats only work if I'm here to be threatened. If I disappear, completely leave the city, change my identity, start over somewhere he can't find me, then his leverage disappears too. Max read the document, his face growing paler with each line. It was a comprehensive plan for liquidating her assets, transferring ownership of Beaumont affairs to her employees, and establishing a new identity in a location far from Boston. This is insane, he said. You're talking about giving up everything you've built, everyone you care about. I'm talking about protecting them. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. If I'm gone, truly gone, then Damien has no reason to continue his vendetta against you. His obsession is with me, not you. Without me as a target, you become irrelevant to him. And our baby? The question hit her like a physical blow, and for a moment, her composure cracked. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, where their child grew safe and loved. Our baby will be born free, she said quietly. Free from Damien's poison, free from the toxic legacy of my marriage to him, free to grow up knowing that their mother loved them enough to sacrifice everything to keep them safe. This is not love, Evangeline. This is martyrdom. No, she corrected, her voice growing stronger. This is strategy. This is me using the only weapon Damien doesn't expect my willingness to completely disappear rather than play his game. Max stood abruptly, running his hands through his hair in frustration. There has to be another way. We could go public with what we know about Damien, expose his corruption. And while we're fighting that battle, how many people suffer? How many of your employees lose their jobs during the investigation? How many children don't get scholarships? Because your foundation is frozen? She shook her head. I won't let innocent people pay the price for Damien's obsession with me. I won't let you pay that price either. It's not your choice to make, she said gently but firmly. This is my decision, Max, my sacrifice to make. They stood facing each other across her living room, two powerful people brought to their knees by the machinations of a man who couldn't bear to lose. But even in this moment of crisis, Evangeline's strength shone through like a beacon. How long? Max asked finally, his voice broken. I don't know, she admitted. Long enough for Damien to move on, to find another target for his rage. Long enough for our child to be born safely. Long enough for you to secure your assets and protect your people. And after that, then we'll see. Maybe Damien will self-destruct the way men like him always do. Maybe we'll find evidence that destroys him instead of us. Maybe. Her voice trailed off, Because they both knew maybe wasn't enough to build a future on. Max moved to her, pulling her into his arms with desperate intensity. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I love you more than my companies, more than my money, more than anything I've ever built. Let me choose you over all of it." "I love you too," she whispered, memorizing the feel of his arms around her, the sound of his heartbeat against her ear. "That's exactly why I can't let you." They held each other as the sun set over Boston Harbor, both knowing that this might be their last night together for years to come. When they made love, it was with the desperate passion of lovers about to be separated by war, every touch a promise, every kiss a vow. The next morning, Evangeline woke before dawn and began executing her plan with military precision. Bank accounts were emptied, documents were destroyed, new identities were established through contacts she had cultivated during her years in event planning. She had learned that in her business, discretion and the ability to make problems disappear were just as valuable as creativity and organization. At noon, she placed a single manila envelope on Damien's desk while he was at lunch, evidence of his own financial crimes that she had been gathering since their marriage began to crumble. It was insurance, a guarantee that if he ever tried to find her or harm Max, she would destroy him completely. The note inside was brief. Checkmate. Stay away from Maximilian Ashworth, and I stay away from the sec. Try to find me, and I'll make sure you lose everything you have left. E. At 2:00, she left a longer letter for Max on their table in the rooftop garden, along with her grandmother's ring and a single white rose. "My dearest Max, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Please don't try to find me. Not yet. Give me time to build a safe place for our child, a life free from Damien's poison. I'm not running from you. I'm running to a future where our baby can grow up whole and happy and free. Someday, when it's safe, I'll find my way back to you. I promise. Until then, know that every sunset I watch will remind me of the evenings in your garden. Every rose I see will carry the memory of your love. Every day I carry our child will be a celebration of what we created together. You made me believe in love again. You showed me what it means to be truly valued, truly seen, truly cherished. No matter how long we're apart, that will never change. Build your empire, protect your people, and trust that somewhere in this world, I'm doing the same. Trust that our love is strong enough to survive this separation, strong enough to bring us back together when the time is right. I love you beyond words, beyond time, beyond anything Damien Ravencroft could ever understand or destroy. Forever yours, Evangeline P.S. Our child will know their father's name, will know they come from love, will know they are wanted and cherished even if we can't be together yet. I promise you that." At 3:00, she climbed into a nondescript sedan and drove away from Boston, away from everything she had built, away from the man she loved more than life itself. But she wasn't broken. She wasn't defeated. She was Evangeline Beaumont, and she had just executed the most strategic retreat in the history of love and war. Now came the hardest part, rebuilding from nothing and trusting that love would find a way. Chapter 6, Ocean of Tears. 3 years, 2 months, 17 days. Evangeline counted each sunset since Boston, watching the sun vanish into the Pacific from her Moonrise Bay cottage porch. The small coastal town had become her refuge, a place to rebuild both life and soul. Flour dusted her apron as she prepared Aurelius's birthday cake, watching her 3-year-old chase seagulls beyond their window. He was extraordinary long limbs and boundless energy, Max's piercing blue eyes and her stubborn determination. His laughter could mend any heartbreak. "Mama!" Aurelius burst through the screen door, his dark curls wind-tossed and his cheeks flushed with excitement. "The big waves are here. Can we go swimming?" "After your party, my love," she said, kneeling to his level and smoothing his hair. "Remember, Mrs. Chun is bringing her famous chocolate chip cookies, and Sam's mama is coming with her blueberry pie." Aurelius nodded solemnly, though his eyes still danced with anticipation. And then presents? And then presents, she confirmed, pressing a kiss to his forehead. The past 3 years had transformed her in ways she never could have imagined. Elena Vasquez, her new identity, carefully crafted and legally sound, had arrived in Moonrise. Faye pregnant, alone, and determined to build something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. She had used her event planning skills to start a small but thriving business, coordinating weddings and local festivals, earning enough to buy the cottage and establish a comfortable life for herself and Aurelius. But more than financial stability, she had found something she had never experienced before: community. The residents of Moonrise Bay had embraced her without question, never prying into her past, simply accepting her as one of their own. She had become the woman they called when their children needed tutoring, when fundraising events required, organizing, when anyone needed someone reliable and kind. "You're thinking about him again," observed Isabella Chen, her closest friend and neighbor, as she arrived with a platter of cookies and knowing eyes. "I think about him every day," Evangeline admitted, not bothering to deny it. Isabella was one of the few people who knew there was more to Elena's story than she shared publicly. "Any word from your investigators?" Evangeline shook her head. "Damien's still in Boston, still making noise about his business ventures, but he seems to have moved on from his obsession with finding me." Max ... double quote. She paused, her throat tightening. "Max is thriving. His companies are stronger than ever. His charitable work has expanded globally, and he's been nominated for humanitarian awards 3 times in the past year. But I can see it in the photos, the way he carries himself in interviews. He's successful, but he's not happy. He's surviving, not living." Isabella squeezed her shoulder. "The same could be said about you, my friend." Before Evangeline could respond, more neighbors arrived for Aurelius's party. The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter, games, and the simple joy of watching her son be celebrated by people who love him. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded her of evenings in Max's rooftop garden, Evangeline felt the familiar ache of longing settle in her chest. After the guests had gone and Aurelius was tucked into bed, exhausted from excitement and sugar, Evangeline sat on her porch with her laptop, following her nightly ritual of monitoring Max's world from afar. Her private investigators sent monthly reports, but she also kept track through news articles, business journals, and social media posts that captured glimpses of his life. Tonight, she found an article about his latest charitable venture, a foundation providing technology education to underserved communities worldwide. The accompanying photo showed him at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, impeccably dressed and professionally smiling, but she could see the loneliness in his eyes that others might miss. "Daddy looks sad," said a small voice behind her. Evangeline turned to find Aurelius padding across the porch in his dinosaur pajamas, his favorite stuffed elephant tucked under his arm. "You should be sleeping, little man," she said, closing the laptop and pulling him onto her lap. "I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about Daddy." Aurelius settled against her chest with the easy affection of a well-loved child. "Why doesn't he live with us?" It was a question he asked regularly, and Evangeline always gave him the same truthful but age-appropriate answer. "Daddy lives far away because there are bad people who might try to hurt our family if we were all together. But he loves you very much, and someday when it's safe, we'll all be together." "How do you know he loves me if he's never met me?" The question pierced her heart. "Because I tell him about you. In letters I write but can't send. In prayers I say every night, in all the ways that love travels across distances. And because you're part of him, sweetheart. Every time you laugh, every time you're brave, every time you're kind to others. That's Daddy's love living inside you." Aurelius considered this with a seriousness that made him seem older than his years. "Will, you tell me again about the garden where you and Daddy met?" Evangeline settled back in her rocking chair and began the story that had become their bedtime. Ritual, a fairy tale about a brave princess and a noble king who fell in love in a secret garden high above the city. She had told him this story hundreds of times, weaving their real history into something magical and safe for a child's imagination. The princess had to go on a long journey to protect the people she loved. She continued, her voice soft in the ocean breeze. But every night, she would look at the stars and know that somewhere, the king was looking at the same stars and thinking of her. And their little prince was the bravest boy in all the land, Aurelius added sleepily. The very bravest, she confirmed, pressing a kiss to his curls. And someday, when the dragons were defeated and the kingdom was safe, they would all live together in the most beautiful castle by the sea. By the time she finished the story, Aurelius was asleep in her arms. She carried him back to his bedroom, tucking him in beneath the quilt she had made herself during the long nights of pregnancy when sleep wouldn't come. Back on the porch, she opened her laptop again and composed another letter she would never send. My dearest Max, today our son turned 3. He's extraordinary, brilliant, and funny and kind, with your sense of justice and your way of seeing the best in everyone. He asks about you constantly, and I can see you in every gesture, every expression, every moment of stubborn determination. He has your eyes, your hands, your laugh. When he concentrates on building with his blocks, he gets the same crease between his eyebrows that you get when you're solving complex problems. When he's determined to do something himself, he sets his jaw exactly the way you do. I've been watching you from afar, reading about your successes, your awards, your continued fight to make the world better. I'm so proud of the man you are, the leader you've become, the way you've turned your pain into purpose. I know you're looking for us. I know you've hired investigators, followed leads, never given up hope. Please don't stop hoping, my love. Every day that passes brings us closer to the day when it will be safe to come home. Damien has been quiet for almost a year now. My sources say he's focused on his new wife number 3, apparently, and the scandal of his latest business failure. But I need to be certain. I need to know that when we return, we're not bringing danger back into your life. Our son knows he's loved. He knows he has a father who would move mountains for him if he could. He knows we're family, even though we're apart. Watch the stars tonight, my love. Know that somewhere I'm watching them too, and so is our beautiful boy. Until we meet again, Evangeline. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Boston, Maximilian Ashworth stood in his penthouse office, staring out at the harbor where ships moved like ghosts in the distance. His companies had never been more successful. His wealth had tripled. His philanthropic work had gained international recognition. He was considered one of the most eligible bachelors in America, regularly featured on magazine covers and invited to the most exclusive events. None of it mattered. Every success felt hollow without Evangeline to share it with. Every achievement rang empty without her proud smile, her strategic insights, her fierce partnership. He had tried dating, tried to move on, tried to convince himself that what they'd had was a beautiful memory that belonged in the past. But every woman paled in comparison to the memory of Evangeline Beaumont. Every conversation felt superficial after experiencing the depth of connection they had shared. Every sunset reminded him of evenings in his rooftop garden where he had discovered what it meant to love someone completely. Sir? His assistant's voice came through the intercom. The investigators from Secure Solutions are here with their monthly report. Send them in, Max replied, though he already knew what they would tell him. 3 years of searching had yielded nothing but dead ends and false leads. Evangeline had disappeared as thoroughly as if she had never existed. Detective Morrison and his partner entered with apologetic expressions. I'm sorry, Mr. Ashworth. We followed every lead from the facial recognition software, tracked every financial transaction, investigated every birth record for the past 18 months. It's like she vanished into thin air. She's somewhere, Max said with quiet certainty. A woman like Evangeline doesn't just disappear. She's out there, probably using a different name, probably building something beautiful wherever she is. Sir, with respect, maybe it's time to consider that she doesn't want to be found. Maybe she's moved on, started a new life. Then she would have found a way to tell me definitively, Max interrupted. If Evangeline wanted me to stop looking, she would have sent a message. The fact that she hasn't means she's waiting for the right time to come home. After the investigators left, Max walked to his private safe and withdrew the one possession he treasured above all others, Evangeline's final letter. Read so many times the paper was soft as silk. He unfolded it carefully, his eyes moving over. Her elegant handwriting, searching for hope in words that had sustained him for 3 years. Trust that our love is strong enough to survive this separation, strong enough to bring us back together when the time is right. He had trusted. He had waited. He had built an even greater empire so that when she returned, he could offer her and their child a kingdom worthy of their strength and beauty. Because somewhere in his soul, deeper than logic or reason, he knew that Evangeline Beaumont, whatever name she used now, was still fighting her way back to him. And Maximilian Ashworth would wait forever if that's what it took. The same stars that watched over Evangeline and Aurelius in Moonrise Bay witness. Max's nightly vigil in Boston. Two pieces of the same heart, separated by distance, but connected by love that neither time nor circumstance could diminish. Soon, fate would begin weaving the threads that would bring them back together. Very soon. Chapter 7. Small Miracles. The letter arrived Tuesday morning in March, delivered casually among utility bills and grocery circulars. But the letterhead froze her blood. Ashworth Foundation, Children's Education, Initiative. Trembling hands read each word like lightning strikes. Dear Ms. Vasquez, we are pleased to inform you that the Ashworth Foundation has selected the Moonrise Bay Children's Center as a recipient of our annual education grant. As part of this initiative, we would like to sponsor a community celebration to highlight the importance of early childhood education. We understand you are the premier event coordinator in the area and would like to discuss hiring your services for this event. The celebration would take place in 6 weeks, with an anticipated attendance of 500 to 600 community members and special guests. Please contact our West Coast representative at your earliest convenience to discuss details and compensation. Sincerely, Margaret, Foster Director of Community Outreach, Ashworth Foundation. Evangeline sank into her kitchen chair, the letter fluttering from her nerveless fingers. After 3 years of careful invisibility, fate had found her with the precision of a guided missile. Max was coming here, to her sanctuary, her safe place, the life she had built far from his world. Mama, you look scary, observed Aurelius from his position at the kitchen table, where he was creating architectural masterpieces with his breakfast cereal. Just surprised, baby, she managed, forcing her voice to remain calm. Mama got some unexpected news about work, but her mind was racing through possibilities and implications. This couldn't be coincidence. Max owned one of the most sophisticated intelligence networks in the corporate world. If he had found her, it was because he had never stopped looking. The question was, what did she do now? Her first instinct was to run again, to pack up Aurelius and disappear to another town, another coast, another life. But the thought of uprooting their son from the only home he had known, of abandoning the community that had embraced him, of spending another 3 years in exile, made her stomach clench with revulsion. She was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of denying her son, his father, and herself the love that had sustained her through the darkest nights of the past 3 years. More importantly, she was stronger now. The woman who had fled Boston in fear and desperation had evolved into someone harder, wiser, more confident in her own power. Elena Vasquez had learned to fight differently than Evangeline Beaumont ever had, not with corporate strategies and legal maneuvers, but with community support, local connections, and the fierce protection of a mother defending her child. Over the next week, she made discreet inquiries about the Foundation's activities. What she discovered both surprised and touched her. Max had expanded his charitable work exponentially since her departure, focusing particularly on children's education and support for single mothers. Every program seemed designed to help people like her, women who had lost everything and needed to rebuild from nothing. "He's still thinking about me," she whispered to Isabella as they watched their children play on the beach one afternoon. "Even after all this time, he's still trying to save me." "Or maybe," Isabella suggested gently, "he's trying to save himself by saving others like you." The truth of that observation hit her like a physical blow. Max wasn't just running a charity, was running a mission of love, channeling his grief into helping women and children who reminded him of what he had lost. 2 weeks before the event, Evangeline made her decision. She would take the job, she would coordinate the celebration, and she would face whatever consequences came from seeing Max again, but she would do it on her own terms. As the woman she had become rather than the one she had been, the Moonrise Bay Community Center had never looked more beautiful. Evangeline had spent 2 weeks transforming the modest building into something magical, using every skill she had developed during her years as Boston's premier event coordinator. Local flowers adorned every table, string lights created a warm ambience, and children's artwork covered the walls in a celebration of creativity and hope. She stood in the center of it all, directing her team of volunteers with the natural authority that had made her legendary in her old life. She wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress that she had sewn herself, her hair styled in the sleek updo that had been her signature, her grandmother's pearl earrings adding a touch of sophistication. "Elena, you've outdone yourself," said Mayor Williams, surveying the transformed space with obvious delight. "This is going to put Moonrise Bay on the map." "That's the idea," Evangeline replied, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. According to the foundation's schedule, Max would arrive within the hour for a private tour before the evening celebration began. "Mama, do I look handsome?" Aurelius appeared at her side, proudly wearing the little navy suit she had bought him for the occasion. He had insisted on helping with the event, and she had given him the important job of greeting guests and handing out programs. "You look perfect, my love," she said, kneeling to adjust his tiny tie. "Remember, tonight is very special. There might be someone here that Mama used to know, someone very important." Aurelius nodded solemnly. "Will you be happy to see them?" The question was more complex than her 3-year-old could possibly understand. "I think so, baby. But it might also be a little scary." "It's okay to be scared sometimes," Aurelius said, with the wisdom that occasionally emerged from his young. "So, you told me that being brave means doing important things even when you're scared." Before she could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew her attention. A small convoy of black SUVs had arrived, and even through the tinted windows, she could see the unmistakable silhouette of the man who had owned her heart for more than 6 years. "Mrs. Vasquez?" A professional-looking woman approached with an efficient smile. "I'm Margaret Foster from the Ashworth Foundation. Mr. Ashworth is here for the venue tour." "Of course," Evangeline replied, her voice remarkably steady. "I'll give him the tour personally." She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked toward the entrance with the regal bearing that had never left her, no matter what name she used. This was her domain, her community, her event. She would face Max as an equal, not as a woman in hiding. The doors opened, and Maximilian Ashworth stepped into the community center, flanked by security and staff, but somehow managing to look utterly alone. 3 years had carved new lines around his eyes and added silver to his temples, but he was still devastatingly handsome, still radiating the quiet power that had first captured her attention. Their eyes met across the room, and the world stopped, collapsed in on itself, 3 years of separation disappearing in the space between one heartbeat and the next. She saw recognition flare in his blue eyes, saw him take an involuntary step forward, saw his carefully maintained composure crack for just an instant before professional training reasserted itself. "Elena Vasquez, I presume," he said, his voice carefully neutral despite the storm she could see raging behind his eyes. "I've heard excellent things about your work." "Mr. Ashworth," she replied with equal formality, extending her hand in greeting. "Welcome to Moonrise Bay." When their hands touched, electricity shot through her like lightning. His fingers lingered against hers for just a moment too long, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a caress so brief it might have been imagined. "The transformation is remarkable," he continued, his eyes never leaving her face as he gestured toward the decorated space. "You've turned a simple community center into something truly special." "I had excellent raw materials to work with," she replied. "Sometimes the most beautiful things come from unexpected places." They stood surrounded by her volunteers and his staff, having a perfectly professional conversation while conducting an entirely different dialogue with their eyes. 3 years of longing, pain, love, and regret passed between them in glances that lasted seconds but felt like hours. "Mama." Aurelius's voice cut through the tension like a bell, and Evangeline's heart stopped as her son came running across the room, his little legs carrying him straight toward them with the fearless confidence of a child who had never known danger. Max's gaze moved to the boy, and Evangeline watched his face transform as he took in the unmistakable features, his own blue eyes looking back at him from a face that was a perfect blend of both parents. Aurelius skidded to a stop beside Evangeline, suddenly shy in the presence of so many strangers. "Aurelius, sweetheart, this is Mr. Ashworth," Evangeline said, voice barely steady. "He's the kind man whose foundation is helping our community center." Aurelius looked up at Max with curious eyes, showing no recognition but displaying the natural politeness Evangeline had taught him. "Hello, Mr. Ashworth. Thank you for helping our friends." Max stared down at the boy, their son, with an expression of wonder, pain, and overwhelming love. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion barely held in check. "Hello, Aurelius. It's very nice to meet you." He glanced at Evangeline, his eyes asking 1,000 questions. "That's a strong name for a strong boy." "Mama says I'm named after an emperor," Aurelius said proudly. "She says emperors have to be brave and kind and protect people." "Your mama is very wise," Max replied, his gaze finding Evangeline's again. "And very beautiful." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that went far beyond casual compliment. Evangeline felt heat rise in her cheeks, felt the familiar pull of attraction and love that no amount of time or distance had been able to diminish. "Perhaps we should begin the tour," she suggested, needing to move to break the spell that was weaving itself around them despite the presence of dozens of witnesses. As they walked through the center, Evangeline explained the programming, introduced key volunteers, and demonstrated the impact the Foundation's grant would have on local children. Max listened with the focused attention she remembered, asking insightful questions and showing genuine interest in the community's needs. But beneath the professional conversation, she was intensely aware of him, the familiar scent of his cologne, the way he moved with contained power, the careful way he watched Aurelius whenever their son came into view. "The children's art display is particularly impressive," he commented as they paused before a wall covered with colorful drawings and paintings. "Aurelius contributed several pieces," Evangeline said, pointing to a series of drawings that showed a little boy, a woman, and a man standing together under a rainbow. "He's quite artistic." Max studied the drawings with intense focus, and she could see him cataloging every detail, the way their son had drawn the family always together, always happy, always complete. "He draws his father," Max observed quietly. "He draws his dreams," Evangeline corrected. "Children have powerful imaginations." "Yes," Max agreed, his voice soft. "They do." As the tour concluded and the evening celebration began, Evangeline found herself stealing glances at Max throughout the event. He moved through the crowd with the easy charm that had made him legendary in business circles. But she could see the way his attention constantly returned to Aurelius, who was charming guests with his enthusiasm and natural confidence. The resemblance between father and son was unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. And Evangeline's heart ached watching Max discover the child he had never known existed. As the evening wound down and the last guest departed, Evangeline found herself alone in the empty community center, surrounded by the detritus of a successful event. She was gathering the remaining flowers when she heard footsteps behind her. Elena. She turned to find Max standing in the doorway, his staff and security nowhere to be seen. In the soft lighting of the nearly empty room, he looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the man who had held her in his rooftop garden and promised to build an empire with her. "Max," she said simply, abandoning all pretense. They stood facing each other across the room where she had rebuilt her life. Two people who had loved completely and lost everything, finding each other again in the most unexpected place. "He's mine," Max said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, 3 years old. 3 years and 2 weeks. You named him Aurelius." "Golden one," she confirmed. "Because he was conceived in the most golden moment of my life." Max closed his eyes, pain and joy warring across his features. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me know I had a son?" "Because," Evangeline said, her own voice breaking, "I was protecting him, protecting you, protecting all of us from a man who would have used our child as a weapon. And now?" She looked around the community center at the evidence of the life she had built, the people who had accepted her, the strength she had found in starting over. "Now," she said, "I'm ready to stop running." Max took a step closer, then another, until they were standing close enough to touch, close enough for her to see the love and longing that had never dimmed in his eyes. "I never stopped looking for you," he said, "not for a single day." "I know," she whispered. "I never stopped hoping you'd find me." "Come home, Evangeline, both of you. Come home with me." The words were everything she had dreamed of hearing for 3 years, and everything she was still afraid to trust. "It's not that simple, Max. There are things you don't understand, complications." "Then, help me understand," he interrupted, reaching out to cup her face in his hands with infinite tenderness. "Help me understand how to bring my family home." Standing in the soft light of the community center, surrounded by the evidence of the life she had built from nothing, Evangeline looked into the eyes of the man she had never stopped loving and made the most important decision of her life. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Chapter 8. The Truth Unfolds. Dawn painted Moonrise Bay in pearl and rose gold, coloring the ocean like forgotten dreams. Evangeline stood on her cottage porch, coffee warming her hands, watching Aurelius build sandcastles, while Max Still in yesterday's expensive suit helped engineer elaborate moats and towers. The sight was perfectly right, yet hurt to witness. Had talked until 3 a.m., seated at her kitchen table while Aurelius slept peacefully, unaware his world was transforming. 3 years of separation compressed into hours of truth-telling left them emotionally raw but hopeful. "Mama." Aurelius's voice carried on the morning breeze. "Mr. Max is helping me build a palace with a sand princess." Evangeline smiled, settling into her rocking chair to watch the two most important people in her world discover each other. Max had shed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, his expensive trousers now caked with sand, his perfectly styled hair disheveled by the ocean wind. But she had never seen him look more at peace. "The princess needs towers," she heard Max say seriously, as if discussing architectural plans for a real palace. "Very tall towers so she can see her kingdom and protect her people." "Like Mama," Aurelius replied, with the matter-of-fact wisdom of childhood. "Mama protects everyone. She's the strongest person in the whole world." Max glanced toward the cottage, his eyes finding hers across the distance. Even from here, she could see the emotion in his gaze, love, gratitude, and something that looked like profound respect. "Yes," he agreed, his voice carrying to her on the morning air. "Like your mama." An hour later, Sandy and laughing, they trooped back to the cottage for breakfast. Evangeline, had prepared her grandmother Cordelia's famous blueberry pancakes, and she watched with maternal pride as Aurelius chattered nonstop to Max about everything, from his favorite books to his theories about why seagulls were obviously the smartest birds in the ocean. "And my mama makes the best pancakes in the whole world," Aurelius announced, syrup decorating his chin. "She makes them every Sunday, and she always makes them into shapes. Look, this one's a dinosaur." "It's clearly a brontosaurus," Max agreed, with complete seriousness, examining the misshapen pancake. "Excellent choice of dinosaur." They were herbivores, which means they were peaceful and focused on building communities rather than fighting. Aurelius beamed at this validation of his pancake selection. "Mama says fighting should be the last thing you try, after talking and thinking and planning. Your mama is very wise. She tells me stories about my daddy," Aurelius continued, oblivious to the way both adults had gone still. "He's a king who lives far away, but he loves me very much and thinks about me every day." Max's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Across the table, Evangeline felt her heart hammering against her ribs. They had agreed the night before that they would tell Aurelius the truth gradually, gently, but neither had expected their son to open the conversation himself. That's a beautiful story," Max managed, his voice carefully controlled. "What else do you know about your daddy?" "He's very brave and very kind, and he helps people who need help. And he has blue eyes like mine." Aurelius pointed to his own eyes proudly. "Mama says that's how I always know he loves me, because I can see him in the mirror every day." The words hit Max like a physical blow. Evangeline watched and struggled to maintain composure as their son unknowingly described the bedtime stories she had told him for 3 years, stories designed to help a little boy feel connected to the father he had never met. "Aurelius," Evangeline said gently, setting down her coffee, "what would you say if I told you that sometimes when people love each other deeply, they must be apart for a while to keep each other safe, like in the dragon story?" Aurelius asked, his young mind connecting with familiar fairy tales. "Exactly like the dragon story. But what if I also told you that sometimes, when everyone is very brave and very lucky, people who love each other can find their way back together?" Aurelius looked between his mother and Max with sharp intelligence that reminded Evangeline of his father. "Are you telling me something important?" "Yes, sweetheart, something very important." Evangeline took a deep breath, looking to Max for support. He nodded almost imperceptibly, his eyes bright with emotion. "Aurelius," she continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "Mr. Max isn't just a kind man who helps communities. He's your daddy, the king from all the stories, the one who has been thinking about you every single day since you were born." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of waves against the shore and the distant cry of seagulls. Aurelius stared at Max with wide blue eyes that were identical to his father's, processing this life-changing information with the seriousness it deserved. Finally, he spoke. "Are you really my daddy?" "Yes," Max said, his voice thick with emotion. "I really am. Where have you been?" The simple question carried the weight of 3 years of bedtime stories and unanswered prayers. Max looked to Evangeline, who nodded encouragingly. "I've been far away, keeping bad people from finding you and your mama," Max explained, unconsciously echoing the fairy tale narrative that had shaped Aurelius's understanding. "But I've been looking for you both every single day, hoping for the chance to meet you." Aurelius slid down from his chair and walked around the table to stand directly in front of Max. For a long moment, father and son studied each other with identical expressions of curiosity and wonder. Then Aurelius reached up and touched Max's face with one small hand, as if confirming that this miraculous person was real. "You have the same eyes as me," he observed. "Yes, I do, and Mama says I have your hands." He held up his small fingers, comparing them to Max's larger ones. "She's right. Do you really love me, even though you never met me before?" The question broke Max's carefully maintained composure. He knelt down to Aurelius's level, bringing them eye to eye, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with 3 years of suppressed longing. "I have loved you since the moment I knew you existed," he said simply. "I have thought about you every morning, when I wake up, and every night before I sleep. I have wondered what you like to eat, what makes you laugh, what you dream about. And now that I've met you, I love you even more than I thought possible." Aurelius considered this with the gravity that made him seem older than his years. Then, with the uncomplicated acceptance that was purely childhood, he threw his arms around Max's neck in a fierce hug. "I love you too, Daddy." The words shattered the last of Max's control. He held his son close, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs as 3 years of grief and longing finally found release. Evangeline watched through her own tears as the two most important people in her world discovered each other and felt her heart healing in ways she hadn't known were possible. The next 3 days passed in a golden haze of discovery and bonding. Max had cleared his schedule completely, ignoring the increasingly frantic calls from his assistants, focusing entirely on making up for lost time with his son. They built elaborate sand castles, flew kites on the beach, read stories together, and had serious conversations about everything from dinosaurs to space travel to the proper construction of the perfect peanut butter sandwich. Evangeline watched, it all with a mixture of joy and trepidation. Seeing Max with Aurelius was everything she had dreamed of during the long years of separation, but it also made her acutely aware of how much they had all lost during those years apart. "He's incredible," Max said on their third evening together, as they watched Aurelius play with his toys in the living room. "Brilliant and funny and kind. Evangeline, you've done something miraculous in raising him." "We did something miraculous in creating him," she corrected. "He's the best of both of us." "I can't believe I missed so much. His first words, his first steps, 3 birthdays, ... Max's voice was heavy with regret. "You didn't miss them by choice," Evangeline reminded him. "You missed them because I made an impossible decision in an impossible situation. The blame for that lies with Damien, not with us." "Speaking of Damien," Max said carefully, "my security team has been monitoring his activities. He's been quiet for almost 2 years now, remarried, focused on his new wife and trying to rebuild his reputation after the scandal. But my people think he may have been tracking my movements. If he realizes I found you, if he figures out we have a son." The old fear clenched in Evangeline's stomach, but it was different now, tempered by 3 years of independence and strengthened by the fierce protectiveness of a mother who had built her own kingdom. "Let him come," she said quietly. "I'm not the same woman who ran from him 3 years ago, and I'm not alone anymore." Max studied her face, noting the steel beneath her calm exterior. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that I'm tired of letting Damien Ravencroft dictate the terms of our lives. I'm thinking that he's had 3 years to move on, and if he chooses to make this a war, then we'll give him one." Her voice grew stronger, more determined. "But this time, we fight together, as equals, as partners, as a family." "Evangeline, no." "Max, I appreciate that you want to protect us, but protection isn't what we need anymore. What we need is partnership. You bring your resources, I bring mine. You bring your connections, I bring my community. Together, we're stronger than anything Damien can throw at us." Before Max could respond, his phone rang. His expression darkened as he looked at the caller ID. "Morrison, my head of security," he explained, answering the call with a terse "yes." Evangeline watched his face grow grimmer as he listened. "When?" He hung up. His expression was thunderous. "Damien's here," he said simply. "He flew into the small airfield about 20 miles north 2 hours ago. He's asking questions in town, showing your picture around." Fear and fury warred in Evangeline's chest, but the fury won. After 3 years of peace, 3 years of building a life for herself and her son, Damien was once again trying to destroy everything she had created. "Mama," Aurelius appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tension in their voices. "Is something wrong?" Evangeline looked at her son, her brave, brilliant, beautiful son who had never known fear because she had made sure he never had to, and felt her resolve crystallize into something unbreakable. "Nothing's wrong, baby," she said, opening her arms so he could run to her for comfort. "But Mama and Daddy need to have some grown-up conversations with someone who wasn't very nice to us before." "A bad person?" Aurelius asked, his arms tightening around her neck. "Someone who made some bad choices," she corrected. "But you don't need to worry about it. Daddy and I are going to handle everything." As she held her son and looked at Max across the room, Evangeline felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Complete confidence in their ability to face whatever storm was coming. Because this time, they wouldn't face it alone. This time, they had each other. Chapter 9. Fighting for Forever. Damien Ravencroft arrived in Moonrise Bay like a storm cloud, his black sedan flanked by 2 SUVs filled with private security. 3 years had ravaged him, his face marked by bitterness and excess, expensive suits unable to hide the corruption, eating his soul. But his eyes remained exactly as remembered, cold, possessive, utterly without compassion. "Isabella, take Aurelius to your house," Evangeline said quietly to her friend, who had arrived minutes earlier after receiving Evangeline's emergency call. "Keep him there until this is over." "Elena, you don't have to face this man," Isabella protested. "We can call the police, have him arrested for harassment." "No," Evangeline said firmly, her voice carrying the steel that had been forged through 3 years of independence. "This ends today. One way or another, this ends today." Max emerged from the guest room where he had been making rapid-fire phone calls to his security team and legal advisors. He had shed his casual vacation clothes for a sharp business suit, transforming back into the corporate warrior she remembered from Boston. "Aurelius is safe?" he asked. "Isabella's taking him to her house. He thinks it's a play date." Evangeline turned to face Max, noting the protective fury radiating from every line of his body. "Remember what we agreed. We handled this together as equals. No heroics, no attempts to shield me. We stand side by side." "Evangeline Elena," she corrected firmly. Evangeline Beaumont was a woman who could be threatened and manipulated. Elena Vasquez is someone else entirely. Before Max could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the cottage. Not the polite tap of a neighbor or friend, but the demanding pound of someone accustomed to having doors opened immediately. Evangeline straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked to the door with the regal bearing that had never left her, no matter what name she used. When she opened it, she found herself face to face with the man who had once tried to own her soul. "Hello, Damien," she said with perfect composure. "You're trespassing. Evangeline." His voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth as silk and twice as deadly. Or should I say Elena? Such a common name for such an uncommon woman. "I prefer Ms. Vasquez," she replied coolly. "And you can say whatever you need to say from where you're standing. You're not welcome in my home." Damien's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Your home? How got quaint. Though I suppose after living in our mansion on Beacon Hill, this little cottage must feel rather cramped." "On the contrary, it feels like freedom." Evangeline stepped aside to reveal Max standing behind her, and she felt a surge of satisfaction at the flash of jealousy and rage that crossed Damien's features. "Ashworth," Damien spat, "I should have known you'd be here the moment you realized where she was hiding." "Mr. Ravencroft," Max replied with the cold courtesy, "might show to a particularly unpleasant business rival. I understand you've been asking questions around town. Perhaps we should discuss what you want so we can resolve this quickly." "What I want is my wife back." "Ex-wife," Evangeline corrected sharply. "Divorced, legally and completely. 3 years ago. I believe the papers mentioned irreconcilable differences and fraud. Damien's facade of civility cracked slightly. A temporary setback. I've rebuilt everything you tried to destroy, Evangeline. I have more money now than when we were married. More influence, more power. I can give you everything you threw away. I didn't throw anything away, she replied, her voice growing stronger. I escaped from a prison and ran straight into his arms, Damien sneered, gesturing toward Max. Tell me, darling, does he know about the child? The words fell into the afternoon air like grenades. Evangeline felt Max tense beside her, but his expression remained carefully neutral. What child? Max asked with perfect calm, though Evangeline could hear the lethal undercurrent in his voice. Damien's smile was triumphant. Didn't she tell you? Our dear Evangeline has been keeping secrets. There's a little boy 3 years old, I believe. Dark hair, blue eyes, born approximately 9 months after she ran away from Boston. My son, Evangeline said clearly, is none of your concern, isn't he? Damien pulled out his phone, showing them a series of photographs clearly taken from a distance Aurelius playing on the beach, building sandcastles with Max, laughing as his father lifted him high in the air. I have to say, the resemblance to Ashworth is quite striking. Either you have very specific taste in men, or this situation is more complicated than it appears. Max stepped forward, and Evangeline recognized the dangerous calm that preceded his most devastating business maneuvers. Mr. Ravencroft, I'm going to give you one opportunity to state what you want and leave peacefully. After that, my patience ends. What I want is simple, Damien replied, his mask of civility completely dropped now. I want my wife back, and I want you to understand the consequences of continuing this pathetic romance. He gestured to one of his security guards, who handed him a thick manila folder. You see, Mr. Ashworth, I've spent the last 3 years rebuilding. My network, my influence, my ability to destroy my enemies. And I've learned some very interesting things about your business practices. We've been through this before, Max said dismissively. You have nothing on me that would survive legal scrutiny. Perhaps not, Damien agreed, but I don't need ironclad evidence, do I? I just need enough to raise questions, enough to trigger investigations, enough to tie up your assets and destroy your reputation while you spend years proving your innocence. He opened the folder, revealing photographs, documents, and what appeared to be financial records. Did you know that your charitable foundation has been inadvertently funding organizations with ties to offshore tax havens? Or that 3 of your largest government contracts were awarded after private meetings with officials who have since been indicted for corruption? Circumstantial at best, Max replied, but Evangeline could see the concern in his eyes. Circumstantial but damaging, Damien confirmed, especially when combined with testimony from certain individuals who are willing to swear they witnessed improper discussions between you and Senator Morrison. Bought testimony, Evangeline said flatly. Everyone in this town knows you've been throwing money around, asking questions and looking for people willing to say whatever you want them to say. Damien's attention snapped back to her with laser. Focus, clever girl. Yes, I have been asking questions, and I've learned some fascinating things about your little sanctuary here. Did you know that Miss Chin's restaurant has been operating without proper permits? Or that the community center you're so fond of has some rather creative interpretations of building codes? The threat was clear. If they didn't give him what he wanted, he would destroy not just Max's empire, but the entire community that had embraced Evangeline. You bastard, she breathed, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. These people have nothing to do with your obsession with me. They do now, Damien replied with cold satisfaction. The moment they chose to protect you, they became part of this game. It was then that Evangeline realized her mistake. She had been thinking like the woman she used to be, focusing on legal strategies and corporate maneuvering. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She was Elena Vasquez, member of a community that had accepted her without question, mother to a child who had never known fear, partner to a man who loved her strength rather than trying to diminish it, and Elena Vasquez didn't. Fight like Evangeline Beaumont. You know what, Damien? She said, her voice suddenly calm again. You're absolutely right. These people are part of this now, which means you've made a very serious error in judgment. Before he could ask what she meant, the sound of vehicles approaching broke the afternoon quiet. But these weren't more of Damien's cars, these were pickup trucks, family sedans, and the distinctive white van that belonged to the Moonrise Bay Volunteer Fire Department. Mayor Williams was the first to reach them, followed by Isabella, pastor, Rodriguez from the community church, Dr. Patterson from the local clinic, and what appeared to be half the town's adult population. Elena, Mayor Williams said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had spent 40 years protecting his community. Is this man bothering you? He is, she replied simply. Well then, the mayor continued, his gaze fixed on Damien. With unmistakable hostility, I think it's time he left. Damien looked around at the growing crowd of townspeople, his confidence visibly shaking. This is a private matter. Nothing's private when it threatens our friends, interrupted Sam Morrison, the local mechanic whose wife made the best blueberry pie in 3 counties. We take care of our own here. And Elena is our own, added Dr. Patterson firmly. Has been since the day she arrived. More voices joined the chorus, a unified wall of community support that Damien had never encountered before. In his world of corporate boardrooms and hired loyalties, the genuine affection and protection these people offered was completely foreign. I have resources you can't imagine, he sputtered, clearly off balance. I can destroy this entire town with... What? Pastor Rodriguez asked mildly. False accusations? Bought testimony? Threats against hard-working people who've done nothing wrong? Isabella stepped forward, her phone in her hand. Because I've been recording this entire conversation, and I think the authorities might be very interested in hearing a wealthy man threaten to destroy a community unless he gets his ex-wife back. As would the media, added Mayor Williams. I imagine the story of a bitter ex-husband trying to terrorize a small town would make for compelling television. Damien's face was growing redder with each passing moment. You don't understand who you're dealing with. We understand perfectly. Evangeline interrupted, stepping forward with the confidence of a woman backed by an army of friends. We're dealing with a man who's so pathetic, so unable to accept that his ex-wife chose to leave him, that he's willing to threaten innocent people to get revenge. She pulled out her own phone, showing him a recording app that had been running throughout the conversation. A man who just confessed to bribing. Witnesses threatening to frame an innocent businessman and planning to destroy a community out of spite. I wonder how that would play with the authorities in Boston. Or with your new wife. For the first time, real fear flickered in Damien's eyes. You wouldn't... I would, she said simply. Because I'm not the woman you married anymore, Damien. I'm not someone who can be threatened or manipulated or controlled. I'm someone who fights back. Max stepped up beside her, his hand finding hers in a gesture of unity that was visible to everyone present. And she's not fighting alone. The crowd murmured their agreement, a wall of solidarity that made Damien's hired security look positively tiny by comparison. This isn't over, Damien said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Yes, Evangeline replied with quiet finality. It is. You have 2 choices, Damien. You can get in your car and drive away, never to return or threaten anyone in this town again. Or you can continue this harassment, and I'll make sure that recording finds its way to every news outlet, every law enforcement agency, and every social media platform that might be interested in the story of a wealthy man's obsession with destroying his ex-wife's happiness. She paused, her voice growing even softer and more dangerous. Choose carefully. Because if you choose wrong, I won't just destroy your reputation. I'll destroy everything you built, everything you are, and everything you hope to become. And I'll do it with the kind of precision you could never imagine. Damien looked around at the circle of determined faces, at the man who clearly adored his ex-wife, at the community that had closed ranks around her like a protective shield. For the first time in his life, he was completely outmaneuvered. "This isn't over," he repeated, but the words sounded hollow even to him. "Yes," Evangeline said again. "It is." Without another word, Damien turned and stalked back to his car. His security detail followed, and within minutes, the black sedan was disappearing down the coastal highway. As the crowd began to disperse, neighbors stopping to hug Evangeline and offer reassurances that they would always protect her and Aurelius. Max pulled her into his arms. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," he murmured against her hair. "Too late," she replied, tilting her head to look at him. "You already have my heart. There's no more dangerous position in the world." Later that evening, as Aurelius slept peacefully in his bed and the cottage was filled with the soft sound of ocean waves, Max found Evangeline sitting on the porch swing, still processing the day's events. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling beside her. "Free," she said simply. "For the first time in 6 years, completely free. And us? Where do we go from here?" Evangeline turned to look at him, this man who had waited for her, searched for her, loved her through 3 years of separation and uncertainty. "Home," she said. "We go home. All 3 of us together. Boston? Wherever we want," she corrected. "Because home isn't a place, Max. It's where we choose to build our life together." He pulled her closer, and she rested her head against his shoulder, watching the stars reflect on the water. "I love you, Elena Vasquez," he said softly. "I love you too, Maximilian Ashworth," she replied. "And tomorrow I'm going to marry you." "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," she confirmed. "We've wasted enough time, don't you think?" His answer was a kiss that tasted like promises, like hope, like the beginning of forever. Chapter 10, Love's Victory. 6 months later, Evangeline stood at cliff's edge overlooking Moonrise Bay, wedding, dress flowing in ocean breeze like liquid starlight. The gown was elegant simplicity ivory silk glowing against her dark skin, delicate lace sleeves from Grandmother Cordelia, a train whispering against wildflowers scattered across the clifftop. Never had she felt more beautiful, powerful, or perfectly herself below them. The Pacific Ocean stretched to the horizon in shades of sapphire and silver, while behind them, their guests, an intimate gathering of family, and the friends who had become family waited in white chairs arranged in a perfect semicircle. The altar was simple but breathtaking, an arch of white roses and jasmine that Max had flown in from his Boston rooftop garden, now thriving in California soil. "You look like a queen," whispered Isabella, adjusting the final details of Evangeline's veil. "The most beautiful queen who ever lived." "I feel like one," Evangeline replied, her hand moving instinctively to her stomach where their second child was growing, a secret she and Max had discovered just 2 weeks earlier, adding even more joy to their already perfect celebration. String quartet began the processional, and Evangeline felt her heart soar as she saw Max waiting for her at the altar. He stood tall and magnificent in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, his eyes fixed on her with such love and wonder that she felt as if she could fly. Beside him, Aurelius fidgeted proudly in his miniature tuxedo, the rings clutched carefully in his small hands. At 3.5, their son had appointed himself the most important person in the wedding party, taking his duties as ring bearer, with the gravity befitting a little prince. He had spent weeks practicing his walk down the aisle, determined to make both his parents proud. "Ready, little man?" Evangeline asked, taking Aurelius's free hand. "Ready, Mama," he replied with the confidence that never failed to amaze her. "Daddy's waiting for us." Together, mother and son began their walk toward the altar, toward Max, toward the future they were finally free to claim. The guests rose as one, but Evangeline barely noticed them. Her entire world had narrowed to the man waiting for her with tears of joy streaming down his face. Max had asked her to walk herself down the aisle, not because she lacked someone to give her away, but because Evangeline Beaumont belonged to no one but herself, and her choice to marry him was hers alone to make. When they reached the altar, Aurelius carefully handed the rings to Pastor Rodriguez before throwing his arms around Max's legs. In an exuberant hug that made the entire gathering laugh with delight. "Take care of my mama," he whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Forever and always," Max promised, his voice thick with emotion as he ruffled his son's hair. Pastor Rodriguez, who had become a dear friend during their months of preparation, smiled at the family before him. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness something extraordinary. The union of two souls who have found their way back to each other despite every obstacle life could place in their path." Evangeline looked into Max's eyes and saw their entire journey reflected there. The night they met at the charity gala, the stolen moments in his rooftop garden, the agony of separation, the joy of reunion, and the fierce determination that had brought them to this moment. "Maximilian," Pastor Rodriguez continued, "do you take Evangeline to be your wife, your partner in all things, your equal in building the life you've dreamed of together?" "I do," Max said, his voice carrying across the cliff top like a vow that even the ocean could hear. "I take her not to complete me, but to build an empire with me. Not to save her, but to stand beside her as she saves the world. I promise to love her strength, celebrate her independence, and spend every day proving worthy of the incredible gift of her trust." "Evangeline," the pastor said, turning to her, "do you take Maximilian to be your husband, your partner in all things, your equal in building the life you've dreamed of together?" "I do," she replied, her voice strong and clear. "I take him not as my rescuer, but as my partner. Not as my provider, but as my equal. I promise to love him fiercely, support his dreams as he supports mine, and build a kingdom together that will shelter our children and inspire the world." They exchanged rings, simple platinum bands that carried engravings of the coordinates, where they first met and where they were now marrying, marking the geography of their love. "By the power vested in me by the state of California and the love that binds this community together," Pastor Rodriguez announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Max, you may kiss your bride." Max cupped Evangeline's face in his hands with infinite tenderness, and when their lips met, it was with the passion of lovers reunited and the promise of partners ready to conquer the world together. The kiss deepened, and for a moment, there was nothing in the universe but the two of them and the love that had survived every test. The gathering erupted in cheers and applause, but the newlyweds were lost in each other until Aurelius tugged on Max's jacket. "Now, are we a real family?" he asked with typical childhood directness. "Now we're a real family," Max confirmed, lifting his son into his arms, so all three of them were together in their first moment as husband, wife, and son. The reception that followed was pure magic. Tables were set up on the beach, lit by thousands of twinkling lights that reflected off the water like captured stars. Evangeline had planned every detail herself, creating an event that was elegant but warm, sophisticated but accessible, a perfect reflection of the community that had embraced her. The food was a fusion of cultures and traditions: Boston lobster and California wine, comfort food from Moonrise Bay, and delicacies from Max's favorite restaurants. The wedding cake was a 3-tiered masterpiece covered in sugar, flowers that matched the real jasmine, and roses of Evangeline's bouquet dot as the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that rivaled any work of art. Max and Evangeline took the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. The song was "At Last" by Etta James, a choice that needed no explanation to anyone who knew their story. "At last," Max sang softly in her ear as they swayed together, "my love has come along." "At last," she replied, her voice full of wonder at how perfectly their lives had aligned. "The skies above are blue." They danced as if they were the only two people in the world, lost in each other and the music and the absolute certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. Around them, their guests watched with the satisfaction that comes from witnessing true love triumphant later in the evening. As the party continued with Aurelius leading a conga line that included Mayor Williams, Isabella, and several very dignified business associates of Max's, the newlyweds stole a moment alone on the cliff overlooking the bay. "Any regrets?" Max asked, pulling her close against the evening chill. "Only one," Evangeline replied, and his eyebrows rose in concern. "I regret that we wasted 3 years we could have spent like this." "We didn't waste them," he said firmly. "We needed those years to become the people we are now, people strong enough to handle this kind of happiness, wise enough to protect it, brave enough to fight for it, and patient enough to build it slowly," she added, thinking of all the ways they had grown during their separation. "Speaking of building slowly," Max said, his hand moving to rest gently on her still flat stomach, "when were you planning to tell me about our newest addition?" Evangeline's eyes widened in surprise. "How did you? You haven't touched wine. All evening, you've been glowing even more than usual for the past 2 weeks. And yesterday, I caught you throwing up in the garden and blaming it on something you ate." His smile was radiant. "Plus, I've been hoping for another baby since the moment I met Aurelius." "We're having another baby," she said, as if testing the words. "We're having another baby," he confirmed, spinning her around until she laughed with pure joy. "What do you think Aurelius will say?" "I think he'll demand to know if his little brother or sister will be available to help build sandcastles immediately," Max replied, making her laugh again. They held each other as the stars came. Out over Moonrise Bay, 2 people who have found their way home against all odds. In the distance, they could hear the sound of their wedding party, Aurelius's laughter, Isabella's voice raised in song, the gentle conversations of friends who had become family. "I love you, Mrs. Ashworth," Max murmured against her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Ashworth," she replied. "And I love the life we're going to build together." "What kind of life do you want it to be?" Evangeline looked out at the ocean, at the community that had embraced her, at the future stretching endlessly before them like a promise. "Beautiful," she said simply. "I want it to be beautiful and strong and full of love. I want our children to grow up knowing that anything is possible when you combine courage with compassion. I want to use our resources to help other women find their strength, other families find their way home. An empire built on love instead of fear," Max agreed. "A legacy that makes the world better." Exactly. They stood together in comfortable silence, planning dreams and building castles in the air, until Aurelius came running over with cake frosting decorating his face and pure happiness shining in his eyes. "Mama, Daddy, come dance. Mrs. Chun says she'll teach us the dance her grandmother taught her." Hand in hand, the 3 of them walked back toward the celebration, toward the music and laughter and love that surrounded them like a blessing. As they rejoined their friends, as they danced under the stars with their son between them, Evangeline felt the deep, abiding satisfaction that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong. 3 years later, their daughter Sophia was born, a perfect blend of her parents' best qualities, with Max's keen intelligence and Evangeline's indomitable spirit. The family of 4 divided their time between Boston, where Max's companies continued to thrive, and Moonrise Bay, where they maintained the cottage that had been their sanctuary. Evangeline's event planning business had evolved into a non-profit organization that helped women in crisis rebuild their lives, while Max's charitable work expanded to include programs supporting single mothers and their children. Together, they created scholarships, funded shelters, and built a network of support that helped thousands of families find their own paths to independence and happiness. But it was in the small moments that their greatest joy was found. Aurelius, teaching his baby sister to build sandcastles, family dinners where the conversation ranged from quantum physics to fairy tales, evenings on the porch where they watched the sunset and planned tomorrow's adventures. "Tell us the story again," Sophia would beg when she was old enough to understand, curled in her mother's lap with Aurelius leaning against his father's shoulder. And Evangeline would tell them the story of the brave princess and the noble king, who found each other in a secret garden, who were separated by dragons but never stopped believing in their love, who built a kingdom where all families could be safe and strong and free. And they lived happily ever after. Sophia would ask, though she knew the answer. They lived powerfully ever after, Evangeline would correct gently. Because happiness is just the beginning. Real love builds something that lasts forever. As the children grew and years passed, their story became family legend, a reminder that love could conquer any obstacle, that families could overcome any challenge, that strength and compassion combined create miracles. Every night, as Evangeline and Max lay in their bed overlooking the ocean, they marveled at the life built from betrayal's ashes. They hadn't merely survived their trials, they had transformed them into triumph. They had built an empire of love that would last for generations. They had found their happily, powerfully ever after. The end. In the annals of great love stories, theirs will be remembered not just for the passion that brought them together, but for the strength that kept them apart when necessary, and the wisdom that brought them back together when the time was right. Evangeline and Maximilian had proven that true love doesn't just conquer all, it transforms all, creating something more beautiful than either person could achieve alone. Their legacy lived on in their children, their community, and every life. They touched with their example of what it means to love with courage, fight with honor, and build a future worthy of the dreams that sustained them through their darkest hours. And in a small cottage overlooking the Pacific Ocean, where the sound of children's laughter mingles with the eternal song of the waves, their love story continues to unfold, as timeless and powerful as the tide itself.